Right. Hi there. What we're doing today is we're going to be removing the inner primary chain case, which will also involve removing the oil pump, and then when we've got the chain case off, we can just pull the clutch out, and that's what we're doing today. Now, normally I would be taking this drive gear off the oil pump because I want to be looking at the oil pump, but in this case I don't really want to be looking at the oil pump. I'm just going to take the oil pump out. I'm fairly sure it's okay, but I just need to take it out to take the rest of the engine apart. So I'm not going to take this drive gear off, and that's good in some ways because we actually use this gear to pull the oil pump out. Now what I would normally do is I would leave these gears in position, and that helps to lock the oil pump, and then I could knock off the locking tab on this nut. It's a strange sort of diamond shaped locking tab on these. On the later ones, it's a slightly different affair. On the very early engines, they've got like two little holes, and you have to I can't think of the word, two little holes, and you try and put something in and turn that. Not great. These are better, the later ones. Anyway, but we don't have to remove this nut because we're not going to be taking the drive gear off. So what I should be able to do is just pull off these. That's the idler or connector, and then I'm not sure if this one wants to come off. It doesn't. I might give it a bit of heat, but I'm going to just give it a little bit of gentle levering with a couple of tyre spanners. It should just pop off this. There we go. It's just a little bit tight, and I think there's no. It's straight onto the bearing. So those two drive gears for the oil pump are now gone, and what we can do is then put these tyre levers behind this gear pinion, and sorry, I do apologise, I'm miles away, and lever it off. But before we do that, we have to undo the mounting nuts. Okay, so I've taken the camera off the tripod so that we can put the flash on, the light on, so that we can see what's what. Now this gear pinion on the oil pump has these holes in it, which obviously A, lighten it, but B, allow us to see the various mounting screws behind it. Now I'm slightly confused as ever because there are actually 4 mounting screws. Okay, so let's have a look. So you've got one there, you've got 4 mounting screws, and then you've got 2 screws that hold the whole body of the pump together. They don't hold the pump in position, they hold the pump together. So what you should do is remove the 4 sort of bolts rather that hold the pump into the crank cases, and leaving the 2 bolts that hold the whole pump together, and then lever it out on this gear sprocket. The problem why I'm confused is that let's have a look. I think I'm trying to remember, but they should have different heads on them. Basically, I'm trying to remember what the heads are, so you know which are the 4 that hold the body of the pump into the crankcases, and which are the 2 that hold the pump together. But someone has replaced the I can't remember which is which, but I think Oh, I really can't remember. But anyway, it's the same heads. So I'm now struggling to work out which are the two that hold the body of the pump together and which are the four that hold the pump into the crankcase. Now, what I do know is that this screw at basically the 11 o'clock position, this bolt, that is definitely a mounting bolt. So I'm fairly sure that that one and the one next to it are two of the four mountings, and the two below are the two mountings, and then these two at the sides are the ones that hold the pump together, taken out, because obviously I don't want to take out the two that hold the pump together, because when I lever this out, the top of the pump will come off and the rest will stay in the crankcase, which isn't great. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the four that I'm fairly sure are the right ones, and then we'll gently have a go at levering the oil pump out, hoping that I've actually undone the correct four. So I'm going to undo these four bolts to begin with. Right, and what I'm just doing before I take the pump out is I'm going to whiz the pump out round by hand. I've got the drip tray underneath the return pipe. There we go. And I'm actually pumping the oil out of the sump just as you would when the engine's running. So this is the is that a return pipe? Yeah, I think so. Ow, ow. So yeah, it's a good way of just getting rid of some of the oil that's still in the sump. Just literally pumping it out. Which is actually proving to be more effective than I thought it was going to be. Okay, so I've now removed the four bolts, I think are the correct ones, which hold the oil pump in the crankcases. I'm hoping that they are. I've also got rid of quite a lot of oil out of the sump just by winding the oil pump round. I think they are. I'm not 100% sure. And also there's four bolts here of the same length. Now one of these bolts should be longer than the other three. Okay, but it's not. They're not. They're all the same length, so that makes me a bit suspicious. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to try and leave the oil pump out, but obviously I've got double jeopardy as it were, because I'm not 100% sure I've removed the right bolts. Having said that, if I remove the wrong bolts, then instead of the pump coming out, just the top of the pump should just come off. Okay, so I've got my tyre levers. I'm just very gently going to put them behind the drive gear. Yeah, it's coming out. I got the right four, and we're just going to ease that. There it comes, and that's the oil pump coming out. There it is. That's the oil pump. Oh, it's got something scratched on it. 8Y3, is that right? Don't know what that means. But I'm just going to turn it. I mean, the oil pump feels, yeah, it feels perfect. There's nothing wrong with that oil pump. So I'm just going to leave it as is. I'll bag it in a minute. But yeah, oil pump is out, and indeed we managed to get rid of the, we managed to take out the correct four screws, even though they're the same heads as the ones that are still in there to hold the pump body together. Marvellous. Okay, that's great. So with the oil pump out of the way and the various drive gears, now we can just remove the various bolts that hold the inner casing on and take that off. Okay, what we got to remember here? I think the main thing we've got to remember here that might throw us out slightly is there are two hex bolts. There's one there, and you can, how well you can see that in the middle, and of course there's the one up here. There's a couple of curved balls as well. Oh, I nearly forgot. Okay, so we've got to take that central bolt out as well as all the normal hex bolts. We've got to take that one out. But on the outside, we've also got that one on the outside, which you mustn't forget. And above all is this. Now this is a boss which looks like it might have the end of a bolt screwed into it. And it does. So if I come round the other side of the engine, this is the back of like the engine breather sort of assembly. And this, I'll put my finger on it, that screw there actually goes all the way through the engine breather and goes into the back of this inner primary chain case. So if we don't take that out, then we're in trouble. So we've got to do all that. I'm just going to mention at this point, I'm just going to show you that someone has had a bit of brain fade. And I know it's a bit difficult to get your head around this, but we're going to try. Now, on a triple, you've got oil in, like from the timing case through the sump, and that's all the engine oil. But then it comes through into the primary chain case, and all the primary chain case is full of oil as well. So you've got like an L shaped. But here, all this is dry. Now over here is the clutch, and over here is just a void. And then there is oil in the sump there, and then on this side is a gearbox oil. So all this bit of the engine is oil, so there's gearbox oil there, and then there's all engine oil in here, and over here there's all oil. But in here, this is just a casing really to stop the clutch, to protect the clutch. It's not sealed. It's just like you'd have on a chain guard. It's a sort of chain guard, but it's a clutch guard. And so, as we'll see when we get this off, this is just sort of like empty. There's a gap between the chain case and like the crankcase. It's empty. But what someone has done, they've got some goo filler and they've filled the gap, because there is a gap normally between this casing and the engine. They've obviously looked and thought, "Ooh, what's that gap doing there? I'll fill it up," and they've put some gun sealant all there. Well, of course there should be a gap, because what happens is water goes in there, it's just empty, and then it just comes out the bottom. When we get this casing off, we'll be able to see it better. Okay, so I still got your head round. Oil, gap, oil, no oil, sort of back of the sump, and then gearbox oil. But this bit in the middle has no oil in it. But someone has thought, "Oh, I better seal that up. That looks like there's a gap there." Yeah, there's supposed to be a gap. Let's water in, and then it comes out the bottom, because there's a gap between the chain case and the crankcases, as we'll see better when we get this casing off. So anyway, first thing I'm going to do is to reach round and remove this screw before I forget, that comes in from that side of the inner chain case. So, is that in? No, no, didn't want to come, but it came. Right, so there we go. That's the very long screw. You can see that it goes all the way across the engine and goes into screws into that boss there. So very, very important to remember that screw on the engine breather. In fact, while I'm doing it, I might as well take the other screws off the engine breather at the same time. Okay, I've taken the other screws off. They're much smaller than that one, and that's just to cover the alloy cover for the engine breather. Okay, I'll keep those together. I'll bag and tag those in a minute. Get rid of the old gasket. Right, so that's out. I'm then going to remove these two while I remember, and then we'll move all the Allen screws. That one out in the middle, yeah, and this one outside, right, yeah, And then there's 2 Allen screws on the outside of the I lost where I put it down there. Yeah, 2 Allen screws on the outside of the casing, right at the top there, and 1 there. Okay, I think that's all. Yeah, and then there's a lot inside the casing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then there's a very sneaky one. It's always a sneaky one. I don't know if you can see it. 7 there underneath the sort of idler shaft for the oil pump. Okay, I'm just going to loosen them all, and then I'll remove them. Yeah. So I think I've loosened them all now. I'm going to remove them all now. Just before I finish doing this, one thing I forgot to mention, that I realised that there's a bit missing from here. There should be a pipe that goes from here, which then goes down onto the top of the primary chain, and that's like an extra oiler. It catches oil in this groove here as it's flung round, goes down a little flexible like a petrol pipe, and drips onto the primary chain to give it maximum lubrication. That's missing on ours. And there should also be a gasket over these holes, because these holes go through into, at least 2 of them do, they're not blind holes, they do go through into the clutch, and oil will get down the threads. Let's have a look. I think that one's blind, not sure. Yeah, maybe I'm hitting the clutch now, I'm sure. So that should have a gasket on, because otherwise oil will get down the threads. Let's have a look. A certain one of them will go. I think that one goes through into the clutch, and it will leak into the clutch. And these 2 will leak out through the holes in the outside of the primary chain case. You know where the screws go in. Then it will come. Oil will get in there and come out of the centre of the casing. That makes sense, along the head, the shaft of the Allen screws. So there should be a little gasket on there. And that's why there's a gasket on there, to stop oil getting down the threads into the clutch, or up the threads and out of the outer chain case. And don't forget this sneaky one. Right, I think we're done, but what we do is, what do we do? Yes, we check, and then we double check. And then we treble check that all the mounting bolts are out. And I know I've done this, I don't know how many times, I don't know, at least half a dozen, 10 times probably. I've taken the primary chain case off. But, you know, it's so easy to make a mistake. When you're doing it for the first time, you don't realise they're there, and you forget them. When you're doing it for the 10th time, you get blasé and you miss one. So, you know, don't get blasé, and just always check. Right, I think though that that's them all off, and maybe the case, yeah, the casing should just fall off now. Because it's an easy one, you can get your fingers behind it, and it's only actually held on really at the front, because of course there's no oil in the back. Right, there we go. So that is the inner primary chain case removed. And an oil seal in the back, and that's the other end of the oil seal to try and stop oil getting into the clutch. We'll see how easy it is to remove the clutch in a minute. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and remove this gasket a bit to try and show you what I mean about this gap. So the gasket won't come off. Right. We'll see it in a minute. You see, look, I don't know if you can see it, right? How well you can see that, but there is a groove just here. And what happens is this is all empty, you see. So water gets in there, down this groove, wherever, and just sloshes about and then drains through there because there's no oil in there, you see? And then there's no oil in here. And this is how we remove the clutch. This is the clutch. I always say, this is an amazingly difficult removal procedure. Are you ready? Oh, clutch is removed. Okay. Now, I can see from that there's quite a bit of grease in there, but I wouldn't say that the main oil leak has been into the clutch. You see, again, I don't know if you can see, but there's a huge gap there because this is really just a casing to protect the clutch, like a chain guard, because there's no oil in there. Okay, so it's all open. So if oil does get in there, it all drips out the bottom. Okay. And that was completely unnecessary to seal that because that's water and it goes down into this and then just drips out the bottom, harmlessly goes away because there's that gap between the chain case and the crankcase. Okay, so we've got the clutch off in one piece, looks nice. We'll be examining that, probably putting a new clutch plate in later on. I can see it's got an uprated clutch bearing fitted already, which is very good news. Okay, I'm going to put these aside. There we go. Slipped out of my hand. And what we're going to do is, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to remove the clutch hub. Okay, remove the clutch hub and then the actual clutch casing, and I'll stop there after that for a bit. Okay, I'm just going to clear up a bit. And then we'll remove the clutch hub. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to remove the clutch housing. In order to do that, we have to remove this, the clutch hub. Now, I'm just thinking here. Yeah, it's okay. So in order to remove the clutch hub, we need to stop it turning. We've got to lock it in some way, but it's almost impossible to lock in order to undo this nut. The clutch hub itself is an interference fit. It's a taper fit on the gearbox main shaft. But this nut is done up very, very tight to hold it on. And we've got to try and get this off. So we have, luckily, we have the clutch hub locking tool. So how do we lock this hub? This is splined and it fits on the splines of the clutch hub and then sits on that idler shaft. We can protect that idler shaft a little bit if we're worried. It won't hurt it, to be honest, but you know, if we want to be dead careful, we can put something there just to protect it. And now look at that, it's locked. So if we get a spanner of the right size, we should be able to simply undo this nut. Put it on max. It's pretty tight, these nuts. Off it comes just like that. Now, wasn't that easy? Without this tool, that job is an utter nightmare, as you can probably imagine. But with this tool, it's dead simple, as you've just seen. Right, our next job is then we have to pull the clutch hub off the gearbox main shaft. But as I said, it's an interference fit. It's put on really tight with this and it doesn't want to come off. There's no way we can get levers behind this hub. There's literally about like 1/2 mil gap between the hub and the casing. We might damage the casing anyway. So we have our next special tool, which is the clutch hub removal tool. Did I say this one? This one is a clutch hub locking tool. Did I say that correctly before? Clutch hub locking tool. This is a clutch hub removal tool, and basically the clever guys actually thought of this when they made these bikes, and they put a thread on the inside of the clutch hub, and here's the removal tool which is threaded, and we simply screw that into the clutch hub, and then we're going to tighten up that, which pushes, this bolt pushes onto the main shaft, and that pulls the let's have a look, that should jam there, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to use this to begin with. I'm just going to put it on minimum torque. Okay, because I need to, doesn't want to come up. I'm going to put the torque up a little bit, but I think I should really use a hand spanner, but I'll just try it. It's come on. I was being a bit of a whimsy there. Okay, so there you go. And by doing that off has come the clutch hub. Now again, what's that? I don't know, 1 minute job, 2 minute job? With these two special tools. Without those two special tools, undoing that nut and then taking this off is like a 3-day job. Worth investing. Clutch hub removal tool, MB. There are two sizes. It's a much larger diameter. That's the sort of standard one. I don't know what that one's for. I can't remember. But you want the larger diameter one. Yeah, so that's P192 MCA. I think that's the part number. And then the clutch hub locking tool. You can make your own. People do. You know, get an old hub from an old clutch plate and weld. You know, fine. Anything with splines on that goes over and locks it. That's a bought one. Obviously worth it in my case because I do a few of these. Right, then we just have 3 screws, which are Phillips screws, which hold this casing on. They're only held on loose because it is just it's a guard. It's like a chain guard, but it's like a guard for the clutch. I'll put my Phillips away, forgetting that I need it. It's all right. I was thinking that was they were hex, but of course they're not. They're Phillips. Or crosshead, I should say. Yeah, that should be okay there. So, just got these 3. Can you see that? Okay, I think you can in there. I can't see the camera, so I don't know. Right, we're just going to undo. There's these 3 screws that hold the casing on. In our case, it's held on by those 3 screws and the gunge up there. One, 2, 3, and then the casing should just come off. But of course, we do have the gunge, so I'll give it a bit of a tap. There it goes, but held on by the, whoops, I'm going to whack the camera, but we can see the camera, so I think we're okay. Just held on by that gunge. It goes. Unnecessary gunge was given way because you see water just goes down and just drains out of here because it's all dry. Phew. Right. Okay. So that's the clutch housing. It's just like it's like a chain guard, and then that lets us access to the sort of gearbox sprocket that the rear chain runs on. Now, I think that will give you some idea of why owners often do not get round to changing this sprocket when it's worn out, because you have to do all of that work of primary chain removal all the way down before you can even get to that sprocket. So often this sprocket is fairly knackered basically because it's such a massive job to get to it. People replace the rear chain, they might replace the rear sprocket on the back wheel, but they don't change this gearbox sprocket because how much effort it is to get through to it. But I'm just having a very initial inspection. Yeah, it looks, you're looking for hook teeth and so on. It looks okay, but but worn. Yeah, it's okay, but definitely worn. So I think we'll definitely be replacing that. And then the other thing to do is to count the number of teeth, because they had let's get this right. Yeah, they had a lot less smaller gearbox sprocket. I say get this right because I can remember which is the biggest sprocket for the gearing. But yeah, so a smaller sprocket on here will give you lower gearing. Yeah. So American models tend to have smaller sprockets on the gearbox sprockets because the Americans love acceleration rather than top speed. What they do, standing, not even 0 to 60. They're weird, those Americans. So they don't do a 0 to 60, they do a standing quarter mile. And that's what I don't know if they still do, but back in the 60s, 70s, they used to judge how fast a bike was by its standing quarter mile. That's what it was all about. And so the American market, they put a smaller gearbox sprocket on. I always think that's ironic because I think of America and I think of like those sort of freeways or whatever that go on forever in Alaska where you're touring for hundreds of miles. So you'd expect them to actually put a sort of higher gear on to make touring more relaxing. But ironically, I think, they put on a smaller one so you had that amazing acceleration, but then you're doing far more revs at top speed. But there you go. So I'll be interested. To be honest, I can't remember how many teeth is what. I'll do it in a minute. I'll count round. And we'll see if this is an American sprocket, but I think we'll change it. I'd recommend changing them anyway because it's such a faff getting to them that if there's any question mark about them, it's worth changing because you've got to do all that work if you ever want to change that sprocket again. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for today, and then next time we're going to look at how to actually remove the gearbox sprocket because, of course, we've now got to lock the gearbox sprocket in order to undo the nut that holds it on. So that will be another challenge for us, locking the gearbox sprocket. That, by the way, is the oil pressure relief valve. Okay, in case you're wondering what that is. Right, and there's the oil pump mounting, and that's the main bearings for the crankshaft. All looking okay. So far, so good. Obviously the engine's just cruddy, but inside it's not too bad. But obviously it's been messed with over the years, as has been exemplified by the fact that those 4 bolts holding the oil pump in were the wrong bolts. There we go. Oh, I picked up a little O-ring there because there are 2 small O-rings that hold the oil pump, that stop the oil pump from leaking oil. One goes in between the cases and the inner chain case, and one goes actually in a groove in the inner chain case. We'll look at that when we come to rebuild the engine. But there are 2 small O-rings on around the oil pump to seal it. Okay, I'm going to bag and tag that for now, and then we're done for today.